Hello guys, this is your fanfic dojo and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Got Betrayed by Sakura aided by Ino Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. The Hokage sat at his desk at 7 a.m. the next morning. Directly across from him were his top interrogators, Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Morino. Inoichi was a 38-year-old jonin of the village who was originally known for being a part of the famous formation Ino-Shika-cho. He was dressed mostly in the standard attire of his rank, but with a red jacket over his vest, arm guards on each arm, and a pale lavender hitai on his forehead. His hair was pulled into a long blonde ponytail that reached to his lower back. Sitting directly opposite was Ibiki Morino. Ibiki was a man of great psychological strength in the village. Being the top interrogator for Anbu had earned him the rank of Tokubetsu Jonin. His body was a mass of scars, which he covered with a bandana bearing the metal plate usually used on a typical hitai and a black trench coat, completed with a pair of black combat boots. So, what is the verdict on Haruno-san? The old man asked. Well, we interrogated her and found that she was indeed telling the truth, Hokage-sama, Ibiki reported. However, without anything other than her testimony, I doubt that we will be able to get any sort of conviction based solely on the testimony of one genin, especially one that attacked her comrade. Unfortunately, Hokage-sama, I must agree with Ibiki-san on this one. Without some form of collaborating evidence against either Homura-sama or Kaharu-sama, all we have is Sakura's word, Inoichi added. Truth be told, he had mixed feelings about what Sakura did, not because of who Naruto was, but because Sakura used to be his daughter's closest confidant. He remembered telling Ino about it after he came home, of course leaving out the specifics of the case other than to say that she brutally attacked her teammate. Needless to say, Ino was in a state of shock. She may not have been friends anymore with the Pinkett, due to their rivalry for the affections of a certain Uchiha, but it is not every day you hear of a former classmate being interrogated by Anbu. With that said, Hokage-sama, what are your orders? Hiruzen was deep in thought. This whole fiasco was a steaming pile of crap. He had little to no evidence to convict his former teammates of any wrongdoing. His only reliable witness to their involvement was a no-name civilian-raised genin who would have been up on charges of murder had Naruto died, and too many holes to fill. He wanted badly to see some justice for the young Uzumaki, but without solid proof of some sort of conspiracy, he could only do so much. Plus, with reports coming in of trouble involving his former student Orochimaru of the Sannin, and the lost sightings of several S-ranked criminals, Hiruzen couldn't afford to divide his attention even more on a case that would probably not see the light of day anytime soon. With a heavy heart, Hiruzen gave his orders. Without a solid case against them, we cannot do much. I am sorry to say that we will have to put this on the back burner until we have more evidence against them. Sakura has been dealt with, and if they are involved, they will know that and hopefully lay low for a while. For now, however, we will have to keep this hush-hush. If they think we are pressing a case, they may destroy evidence or try to concoct a story to cover their trail. I want someone to keep an eye open, but unless something becomes obvious, we downplay this as a freak incident. Am I clear? Hi, was heard from both Ibiki and Inoichi. They didn't like it, but the Hokage had a point. So, it was agreed that they would downplay the incident for now, but keep the case open if more information became available. Kakashi was walking down the early morning streets of Konoha, en route to the training grounds. The events of the previous day had him wanting to meet with his team, or in today's case Sasuke, on time rather than have them wait for hours to let him visit the memorial stone remembering his fallen comrades and sensei. Sakura was still technically in Anbu custody, but Kakashi found out from some of his former colleagues in Anbu that Sakura was slated to be released sometime between that afternoon and the next day. This was good in that it could mean finally getting started on team building exercises, which Kakashi felt that he urgently needed to start, but it was also bad in that it would mean having to put forth more effort to try and correct the errors of his team at a quicker pace. Kakashi had a long night the previous night. He had met up with Asuma Sarutobi and Maida Guy, two other Jonin who had genin teams this year. They had noticed the previous night that Kakashi was not acting like himself and had pried into what had happened. Kakashi then went on to explain what had happened to his team. Both Asuma and Guy were shocked, both at Sakura's actions and Kakashi's oversight. They were a bit tempted to say, "I told you so," but felt that things were bad enough as is. After having a long discussion about the subject, they both decided to chalk up the whole mess to a combination of crazed genin mentalities and poor judgment. Feeling that he had heard enough, Kakashi then had left to go and try and sleep that night, which led to this morning. Kakashi sighed. Things were going to get bad enough for him now that the news of his no wait, the former Team 7's incident, would start to go through all the ranks. This was going to be a long few years. Let's hope I survive long enough to make it that far. Anyways, the last Hatake thought to himself. Naruto looked at the clock on the opposite side of his bed. The device read 9:30. According to the staff, he was going to be able to be released at 12 o'clock that afternoon. Time seemed to be so slow for him. So far, he had visits from a hysteric Iruka Yumino, who was relieved that Naruto was okay, and a distraught Konohamaru Sarutobi who thought his newest rival for the seat of Hokage had died. Rest assured, Naruto had been patient with both of them and had explained that he was fine. He didn't quite want to tell them the details of what happened, mostly because he thought they already knew, but also because he had enough people breathing down his neck. He was drawn out of his thoughts with another knock at his door. "The door's open, you know," Naruto yelled. When the door opened, Team 10 stepped in. Shikamaru and Choji entered first, followed by their sensei and their blonde teammate. Asuma Sarutobi looked like a younger version of the third Hokage. He had jet black hair, a black beard, and brown eyes. His uniform was typical of the standard ninja attire, including a blue Hitai-8, but also included a pair of bracelets on his wrists and a sash from his time as a member of the 12 Guardian Ninjas, a group of shinobi that dedicated their lives to the protection of the Fire Daimyo. Ordinarily, he would be seen smoking a cigarette, but seeing as how he was in a hospital and didn't want the staff to be complaining, he was smokeless. Ino Yamanaka was the female member of Team 10. Her long cornflower blonde hair, with a bang covering one side of her face, was accented by her sky blue eyes. She wore a purple dress as a uniform, as well as bandages covering most of her body, particularly around her waist and legs. She wore what appeared to be some sort of cloth arm guards and wore her blue Hitai-8 around her waist like a belt. The 4 members of Team 10 all came in and surrounded Naruto's bed. "So, Naruto, how are you feeling?" Choji asked. "You know, all things considered." "Well, it could be worse, I suppose," Naruto answered. "I could have actually died. Seriously, you'd think I had just fought against an S-rank criminal and lost or something. So, what brings you guys here?" As troublesome as it is, we wanted to make sure you were still alive, numbskull." "So, are you holding up okay?" Shikamaru asked his blonde friend. "Yeah, it must kinda suck to have your crush, well, you know," Ino said, trying to be the least bit sensitive for once. "Yeah, I'll be okay. The whole, 'I'm gonna kill you' thing though makes me not want to date her, though, Datbeo," Naruto chuckled. The other occupants in the room seemed to loosen up slightly. It seemed that the incident hadn't affected Naruto's sense of humor, so that was at least a good sign. Team 10 visited Naruto for about an hour, before Asuma ushered his team out. Shikamaru simply shook his hand. Choji left a bag of chips for him, and Asuma simply told him that, if Naruto ever needed help with something, that he could search him out and see if Asuma could help him. As they were leaving, Ino surprised everyone by walking over and giving Naruto a brief hug. You know, I'm still a little mad about you taking Sasuke-kun's first kiss, Naruto. But, for all that it's worth, I'm glad you're okay. Thanks, Ino, Naruto said with a surprised look on his face. Usually, most girls avoided him, so to receive a hug from two girls in the span of 24 hours, well, let's just say that Naruto was having one of those moments where you wonder if you woke up in the right dimension or not. After they left, Naruto was starting to get bored waiting for his new team. He figured that the old man was probably keeping Team 7 away for his safety. Naruto didn't really feel threatened by them, but he supposed that it was understandable. He figured that the old man was probably worried that someone would come in and try to attempt what Sakura had pulled. Naruto tried not to give too much thought to what had happened the day before. He had spent most of last night trying to figure out what had happened to him. He came to 3 conclusions. 1. He didn't really think Kakashi did anything wrong. He gave an order that was supposed to be followed. How were they supposed to know that it was also a test? 2. As much as he hated Sasuke with a burning passion, he didn't really do anything wrong. 3. He wasn't Sakura's biggest fan right now. She had betrayed him and had attempted to kill him. After another hour and a half of waiting and being checked by the nurses to see that he didn't die in his sleep, Kurenai, Hinata, Shino and Kiba came to the hospital to pick up their new teammate. Once Naruto was checked out, Kurenai decided to try and get Naruto a new shinobi outfit and check to make sure that he had all of the supplies that he would need for his training. The doctors had told Naruto to hold off on training at least until the next day, so Kurenai decided to try and get Naruto prepared and to simply use this time to get to know each other better. At first, he protested, saying that he already had what he needed, but Kurenai insisted, so reluctantly Naruto agreed to the little shopping trip. That was when she made a note of the neon orange jumpsuit that he usually wore and was rather intrigued. She figured that it might have been his favorite color, but this was a little excessive. He seemed a little uncomfortable when she suggested the idea of replacing it with a more appropriate wardrobe, but she convinced him that it would help him in the long run. Still, she thought, it would be nice to know how he could possibly think that his clothes would be anywhere near what a shinobi would wear in the field. Luckily for her, it was Kiba that decided to ask the question. You know, Naruto, I wanted to know this for a while. Why do you wear that idiotic outfit of yours? What's wrong with it? Naruto asked, as if what he was wearing was typical for someone trained to kill you in at least 100 different ways. Dude, your outfit is a neon orange jumpsuit. It screams, here I am. Now, roast my ass on an open fire and use me as a living target. Before Naruto could bark a retort back, Shino interjected. I must agree with Kiba-san, Naruto-san. Why, do you ask? Because there is no way you would be able to sneak around and practice stealth in a suit that is easier to spot out in a crowd than a blue butterfly in a field of moths. Any sort of retort died in Naruto's throat when he heard that. Thankfully, before he could answer, Team 8 had arrived at a local shinobi shop that sold attire and equipment for the village's shinobi forces. I'm not sure I should go in there, guys. I don't have any money on me, and well, this place is kinda expensive, Naruto trailed off. Inwardly, he didn't really want his team to witness firsthand the kind of treatment that he got from the rest of the village. It was one thing to hear about how he was ignored thanks to the Kyuubi, but it was something else entirely to see the hatred on the faces of everyone that he passed. The other 4 gave Naruto a funny look. Naruto, what are you talking about? This place has the best prices in town on stuff, Kiba asked. Well, when I was in the academy, I couldn't afford new stuff most of the time because I still had to eat, so I never came here because everything here was so darn expensive. That, and like I said, I can't really afford anything in here. Why? His new friends and sensei were rather appalled. Naruto had to choose between food, clothes, and supplies. For that matter, where was he getting used anything? It was considered a safety hazard to recycle most ninja tools unless it was to gather them up after a training session or to melt the pieces down and reforge material. Used equipment had a habit of breaking and shattering, which could cause injury in the field if someone was not careful. Hinata was heartbroken at the idea that Naruto had to choose between eating and having the most basic of needs when he was growing up. She couldn't even begin to imagine what it would have been like if she were forced to live like that. Not that she was spoiled, but she was better off than most. Kiba and Shino were still wrapping their minds around the idea of someone denying an academy-level student food and ninja weapons that would be considered trivial to most anyone. Kurenai was concerned and confused. Concerned that Naruto had been given substandard equipment when he should have been able to afford everything, and confused in that Naruto said he had to choose most of the time. She was aware of the orphan allowance that the Hokage gave him before the academy, and she knew for a fact that it should have been enough to be able to get all of what he needed. Could it be that the village was price gouging him due to the fox? There was one way to find out, so she decided to see just how much Naruto was paying for his needs. Naruto, how much do you usually pay on a typical set of kunai? Kurenai asked. Naruto thought about it. Well, if I can get it used, I can get a set for about 5,000 ryo. Otherwise, I have to spend 7,500 ryo on a new set, Naruto stated like he was stating his favorite flavor of ramen. After he said that, the others were giving him funny looks, like he grew a second head or something. He was slightly confused, and a tiny bit worried that he said something wrong. What? Did I say something? Naruto-kun, why you are aware TT that a typical set of kunai C costs only about 1,500 ryo, right? Hinata shyly asked, hoping not to embarrass Naruto further. She could tell right away that finances, or lack thereof, were not something that he felt comfortable with. Naruto sighed. He didn't exactly want pity for his life, but he realized that if he was going to be on a team with people that could easily find answers if they needed to, he wouldn't have much choice in their reactions. His life wasn't exactly one that most would call great, but it was his life and he learned to accept it as is long ago. That didn't mean he wouldn't do what he could to change that, but he would accept things as they are. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like they were going to let him get away with it. So, he let them drag him into the store to get his things. Upon entering the store, the clerk behind the counter chimed the familiar greeting of most shop owners. Hello, welcome to our shop, feel free to. The clerk stopped when she saw who she was talking to. She appeared to have a look on her face that seemed to radiate hatred like a fire radiates warmth. Team 8 was on edge, not quite knowing how the woman would react now that she saw Naruto. Is there a problem, miss? Kurenai asked innocently, but subtly was staying on guard. Her team may have known about the fox, but the third's law was still in effect and she would enforce it if need be. The store clerk simply put on a fake apologetic look and worded her next phrase carefully enough to not violate the law, but insulting enough to do what she needed. Oh, I'm sorry, Ninja-san, but we only serve humans in this shop. I will gladly serve you for, but she said while pointing at Naruto, will have to go elsewhere. She topped the whole act with a fake smile that was as obviously as fake as the health benefits of ramen. Naruto was about to suggest they try another store, but Kurani held her hand up to silence him. You are aware he is a shinobi of Konoha, correct? He is nothing but a monster and I have the right to refuse service to anyone I wish. Now, please leave. Hinata looked to Kiba and Shino and nodded. Well, if that's the CC case, I might as well tell my clan that we Hyuga are no longer welcome at this establishment. I suppose mom will be a little ticked, but we Inuzuka can manage, I guess. I suppose the Aburame might as well withdraw as well. Why, do you ask? Simple. You are obviously refusing service to the clan heirs of the Aburame and Hyuga clan, as well as the son of the Inuzuka matriarch. That clearly shows that you do not want any of our business. The store owner blanched. Sure, losing the business of one of those clans could have been bad, but ever since the Uchiha were exterminated, the Aburame, Hyuga, and Inuzuka had become the three most powerful clans in Konoha. To refuse service to them was both economic and political suicide. If word got out that they were refused service, it would jeopardize the shop. In an act clearly to save face, the clerk gave a hasty apology and allowed normal service to the demon brat. Naruto was still adamant that he couldn't pay for anything, but Kurenai stated that she would be buying everything, just this once. So Naruto, with Hinata, Kiba, and Shino in tow, went to the racks to gather some clothes for a new wardrobe while Kurenai picked out his ninja kit. In the end, Naruto got a couple of t-shirts in various designs and colors, including blue, black, and burnt orange, much to his delight. He received several pairs of dark green, black and brown shinobi pants, and a dark blue coat with a thin hood and a mesh inner lining to act as a set of armor. In addition, he got a gray coat in a similar fashion to the blue one, a pair of black shinobi sandals, and a pair of black fingerless gloves with a metal plate on each hand with the insignia for Konoha on each plate. Overall, it was a drastic improvement to his old outfit. As the team was leaving the store to go for the evening, Naruto decided to stop and thank his team. Guys, thanks so much for all this. I promise, I will find a way to pay you all back. Stop right there, Naruto. Everyone turned to Kurenai in surprise. I already told you, I chose to pay for this. It is my way of helping you become a better shinobi. You deserve to be treated better than you are now, Naruto. If we can help it, we will find a way to start helping you more. Isn't that right, team? That is correct, Naruto-san, Shino said. We are ninja now. For you to continue to be treated like you were in the academy is unacceptable. We are more than your teammates, we are your friends. As your friends, we will do what we can to make sure that we won't have a repeat of what happened today happen. Being denied your most basic rights is unethical and unacceptable. Yeah, Dobi, Kiba added. Besides, if this means your ass doesn't get as spotted in the field or force your opponent to die of laughing too hard, I think we can stand to do some roughing up once in a while, right Akamaru? Kiba finished with a feral smile as his canine companion barked in agreement. Despite the insulting tone, Naruto knew Kiba long enough to know he was sincere, even if it sounded like a complete insult. Besides, Naruto-kun, why you shouldn't have to hold all of your burdens by yourself anymore, Hinata trailed off. Naruto smiled a genuine smile. Here were 4 people who not only acknowledged him, but were even willing to stick up for him. He had not had that before and he was enjoying every minute of it. He thanked all of his new friends and his sensei and decided to head home for the night. He was going to be able to train with his new team tomorrow, and he knew that this was going to be the start of something great, or at least better than it had been for him up until now. It had been 2 months since Naruto's incident with his former teammates, and so far Kurenai couldn't help but smile. It had been rough with Naruto in the beginning, mainly because there were a lot of things that he needed to be corrected on. His shadow clone jutsu was a practical godsend in that regard. Something like a taijutsu kata that would have taken months to refine was done so in a matter of days, thanks to being able to use the clones. After she had explained the benefits and drawbacks of using the technique to Naruto, he almost immediately began using it in his training routine. It amazed Kurenai just how many he could create. Whereas even someone of the Hokage's level could only do about 2 or 3 at a time if they didn't want to exhaust themselves, Naruto could practically create a full army without breaking a sweat. Granted, that somewhat made him a one-trick pony, but Kurenai wanted him to perfect the basics before she gave him something more advanced, even if she did think that he could probably burn though any high-level technique like it was a basic. The only technique she didn't have him work on was the use of the regular clone technique. While it had benefits for those who could manage it, the combination of the fact that he had a better cloning technique and the fact that his reserves prevented him from being able to perform the technique successfully without practically running him ragged. Kurenai also worked a little on Naruto's habits as well. Granted, he was still mostly hyperactive and tended to rush into things, but Kurenai had worked with Naruto early on to focus on his patience. She discovered early on that Naruto was the type to rush in and work things out later, a habit that would get him killed in the field. So, she had him working on stopping to think before he acted and to learn to listen as much as he talked. It was slow and agonizing at first, but she had gotten him to the point where he wouldn't continually blurt out every 5 minutes about how bored he was at learning theory or an explanation of a mission. She felt that she could be at least thankful for being able to do that much. Kurenai was also impressed with how far Naruto had gotten with working with his teammates. His initial acceptance into the group had done wonders for the blonde genin. He had been a fairly open person before, but his team was slowly but surely seeing the Naruto that was usually not seen by the rest of the world. Granted, the whole team could tell he still had his share of secrets. The one pertaining to the Kyuubi had taken a lot of guts already, but so did everyone else on the team. It was a slow process to have Naruto start opening up, but he was beginning to trust his team more with his burdens. His childhood was still a bit of a sore subject for him, but his team respected him enough to not press when they saw that he was uncomfortable. He also started to become a core member of the team. Thanks to him, Shino was more vocal, well, about as vocal as an Aburame could get. Kiba had an excellent sparring partner and rival, which was a huge benefit for Naruto since he needed someone to spar with that didn't mind scrapping occasionally. Even Hinata had begun to get her stuttering under control. She was still rather shy, but she was not nearly as bad as she had been in the academy. Overall, Kurenai could not be happier with their progress. Currently, she and her team were standing inside the Sandaime Hokage's office. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning and her team was waiting to see what missions they had to perform for the day. Over the past couple of months, Kurenai noticed that each team member seemed to be able to perform better on certain missions than others. Hinata seemed to be a natural at babysitting and gardening, but had a difficult time with taking care of large groups of people or animals. Shino also did well with gardening, but he usually scared little children. Kiba's relationships with dogs came in handy on most missions involving pets or dogs, but his short temper when it came to catching Tora or dealing with rowdy children made things difficult sometimes. Finally, Naruto seemed to excel at painting, no doubt due to his experience as a prankster taking care of plants and, to most everyone's surprise, babysitting. Kurenai chalked that last one up to dealing with Konohamaru most of the time and figured that his experience as an orphan gave him insights into just what a child would want most of the time. However, for one reason or another, he hated pet sitting with a passion and loathed it when it came to finding Tora. Of course, the fact that the wayward cat of the daimyo would assault his face like a scratching post most of the time didn't really help things. As Iruka read off the list of missions to take, Kurenai shot a look over to her students to see the looks of boredom across their faces. Shino's posture slouched slightly, but enough to signal his disinterest in events. Hinata donned her best impression of the typical Hyuga mask, which she only did when she was simply trying to get through a meeting. Kiba was paying attention to Akamaru and completely ignoring Iruka. Naruto simply stared at the Hokage with a bored expression, which didn't go unnoticed by the aging man. Hiruzen signaled for Iruka to stop before addressing Naruto. He knew that, when it came to voicing the devil's advocate of the group, Naruto was usually the one to speak. Naruto, you have been unusually quiet. Is something on your team's mind? Naruto sighed. Ordinarily, he would have simply blurted out his opinion, but his training under Kurenai had taught him that sometimes waiting and gathering your thoughts could help you win your argument, especially if you had the right support for your argument. Well, Gigi, I just think that we are all getting bored of doing the same D-rank missions over and over again. Naruto, Iruka interjected, we've been through this before. Newly minted genin are usually given D-rank missions for the first 5 or 6 months to give them some experience inside the safe environment of the village before entering the field. Anything higher would be overwhelming and would run the risk that you would not be able to handle the risks involved. The chance of injury or death is substantial for newly minted shinobi. But Iruka-sensei, wouldn't it be difficult to be able to tell how we would perform in the field if the only experience we have is in the village? How the hell does that work? Don't get me wrong, I enjoy getting my paycheck as much as everyone else does, but it's not like we're asking for an A-rank mission or anything. Naruto tried to say in order to make a point. Shino stepped forward to back Naruto up. Naruto-san does make an excellent point. What is that, you ask? The point being that we can never truly know just what we are capable of until we experience things for ourselves. Logically, at some point we would have to expand our horizons. Not to mention, we have already completed 22 D-ranked missions already as a team. Kiba, not wanting to be left out, threw in his 2 Ryo. Yeah, besides, if we have to chase that damn cat one more time, I'm gonna end up bringing my mom a brown furred cat-shaped pelt home. Right, Akamaru, his companion yipped in response. Hinata, under the stare of everyone else, apparently everyone else thought that she would say something, spoke up. I believe we can handle a slightly higher mission. We can only truly know if we try, and if worse comes to worse, we will only be able to learn from it. We have come far as a team over the past 2 months or so, and our skills have improved, Hawkage-sama, she stated as she trailed off. Iruka gave a curious glance to the Hokage, as if to look for some sort of support for keeping Team 8 in the village. Hiruzen, in turn, closed his eyes in deep thought. On the one hand, letting Naruto out of the village could be a problem, what with the possibilities of running into someone like Orochimaru or whatnot outside the village. Hiruzen knew that, if someone figured out that Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, someone would come in and try to either take him to be used as a weapon, or possibly killed to eliminate the possibility of Konoha using him in the future. On the other hand, he could not prevent Naruto from leaving forever. As a shinobi under his command, Naruto would have to endure the hardships of the outside world. Plus, his team did raise a good point. In nearly all of the comments that he had heard concerning the team, every person that they were hired by gave rave reviews on how well they were able to perform as a team. Ultimately, though, he knew it was up to Kurenai to decide if they were ready or not. Kurenai-san, do you feel that your team is ready for a higher ranked mission? The professor asked the Jonin. Kurani looked to her team and saw the determined looks in their eyes. Honestly, Hokage-sama, I feel that they are not ready for a high-ranking mission. She paused, taking a look at their defeated posture before continuing. That being said, I believe they could at least handle a C-rank mission. It would do all 4 of them some good to actually get some hands-on experience in the field, rather than trying to create those scenarios inside the village. She was rather pleased with how her team seemed to send a silent, thank you, to her for supporting them. Well, if you are sure then Kurenai, let us see what we have, the god of shinobi responded. Hiruzen then proceeded to look through several scrolls on his desk before selecting one. Ah, this one should suffice. It is a C rank outside of Fire Country, and simple enough that you should be able to complete it in about a week or two, depending on how fast you go. Hiruzen then proceeded to show Team 8 a map showing all of the elemental countries. He pointed to a peninsula that was wedged between Ta no Kuni and the land containing Takigakure no Sato, a smaller village allied with Konoha. This is the Gufuu Peninsula. Mostly, it is a temperate climate, mostly filled with evergreen trees and mountains in the middle. Don't worry, the mountains only reach about 7,000 feet or so. It rains a lot, but there isn't truly much to worry about. In addition to that, there are miles of coastline, ideal for ports and such. Rumors amongst some of the traders that have been in Konoha lately are that there is a small town that is slowly being built along the coast. We wish to send out a small team to deliver an offer of alliance to this village. Due to the access to the ocean, we believe that obtaining an alliance could not only improve our economy, but give us access to a valuable seaport. This is where the 5 of you will come in, Hiruzen explained as he gave a different scroll to Kurenai. I want the 5 of you to deliver this scroll, which contains your basic alliance papers, to this new village. I do not anticipate anything other than the usual riffraff that accompany these sorts of missions. Are there any questions? Shino was the first to respond. How long do you wish for negotiations to last, Hokage-sama? That is an excellent question, Shino-san. While you may not have to negotiate anything, as none of you are technically diplomats, I do not expect negotiations to last more than 2 or 3 days, 5 at the most. Are there any laws that we need to be aware of, Hokage-sama? I do not believe that the laws would be dissimilar to those in Konoha that I am aware of, but thank you for bringing it up, Hinata-san. Will we have to fight enemy ninjas? That is always a possibility, Kiba-san, but unless they are at your level, I would advise you attempt to avoid a confrontation. Remember, part of being a ninja is being able to know when to fight and when to retreat to fight another day. Naruto finally asked the question that everyone had apparently either forgotten or simply were uninterested in asking. What is the name of this village, Gigi? Ah, yes, I should probably tell you all which village to go to. Thank you for reminding me, Naruto. The name of the town is Jizengai. Apparently it was named for the rather charitable nature of the townspeople to help wayward travelers. Looking to see if there were any other questions, Hiruzen could see that each member seemed to understand things fairly well. It was by no means a difficult mission, but Hiruzen felt it would be nice to give the genin some hands-on experience in diplomacy. Now, if there is nothing else, I would like for the 5 of you to leave by this afternoon. I expect all of you to be on your best behavior. 5. Hi, Hokage-sama. Statements were heard as each member bowed and turned to leave. Oh, there is one last thing, Naruto. All 5 people stopped and turned around. Since you will be outside the village on a mission, I wanted to wish you a happy birthday while you were gone. A smile brightened the blonde youth's face before he stepped out the door. Once outside, Kurenai turned to her team. Alright, you 4, listen up. I want you all to go home and pack. Just because the Hokage said we might only be gone for a week or 2 doesn't mean that things won't happen. I want you all to pack extra clothing, seeing as how it might rain. We won't be needing stealth necessarily for this mission, but I would ask for you not to wear something that will stand out. Take your full gear, weapons, first aid kits, and anything else you might need. Also, since we will be going along the coast, bring your swimsuit. Who knows, it is still a bit warm yet and we could stop to swim somewhere. Get something to eat, for we won't be stopping until this evening. Meet me at the north gate at 1:15. Any questions? All 4 genin shook their heads. Good, in that case see you then. With that, she disappeared in a swirl of leaves to go get ready. At 1:15 in the afternoon, Team 8 assembled at the north gate and left for Jizengai. Naruto, for one, could not be happier. His team was aware of his birthday since he told them about the fox, but to hear someone wish him a happy birthday felt even greater. It had not been much of a secret that Naruto wasn't a big fan of his own birthday, but he still usually had a small ritual to celebrate, usually involving Iruka or the Hokage going to Ichiraku Ramen to have a celebratory bowl of a special birthday ramen. But, now he was going to be able to go out of town this year. Sure, he would be on a mission, but it would be better than being holed up in his apartment all day while everyone else went to mourn the dead. After all, for Naruto, being born on a day of mourning made celebrating his birth feel slightly awkward. For as happy as he was, though, Naruto couldn't help but be a little disheartened. There was truly only one thing he really wanted for his birthday: information. Ever since he found out from Chiyoko about how his mother was still alive, he had spent most of his free time trying to find out anything he could on his late mother. He knew it would be pointless to ask the Hokage. Every time he did, Hiruzen would simply tell him that he couldn't know until he was a more accomplished ninja. He tried looking through the archives at the library for an Uzumaki, but no one was registered under that name, or at least they were not publicly known. He attempted to ask some of the older adults about if they knew of another Uzumaki, but everyone he asked either couldn't recall anyone by that name or gave him a funny look. Naruto contemplated breaking into the private records, but he figured one visit to the private rooms of the Hokage and nearly getting caught was probably enough for him for one lifetime. Still, he supposed that he should be happy. At least this year, he wouldn't be alone for the most part on his birthday. He would have Hinata, Shino, Kiba, and Kurenai-sensei to at least spend time with. He was grateful for that at least. As the team began to travel north, using the trees as a quicker mode of transportation, he decided to strike up a conversation with his teammates. So, who else is excited to be getting out of the village for a while? Shino and Hinata simply nodded their heads, but Kiba decided to obnoxiously answer his question. Of course we are excited, Dobi. After all, it's not like we would have anything better to do back in the village, right? Sheesh. You don't have to make me sound like an idiot, Inutem. What did you just call me, dumbass? Can the both of you please calm down? There is no reason to be fighting right now. Oh, why don't you just stick a can of aerosol up your ass, bug boy? Kiba said, before Shino gave him a glare that made Kiba feel as if he was digging his own grave. Anyways, what about you, Naruto? It must be hard having to work on your birthday. Are you kidding? At least this way, I actually have some people to celebrate with, Naruto said. This made Kiba hang his head in shame. He forgot that Naruto was usually alone on his birthday, so to actually have someone to celebrate with was in and of itself a good thing. Seeing that Kiba didn't have much else to say, Naruto decided to try and talk with Kurenai. So, Sensei, are we going to get some training in on this mission? Kurenai chuckled a little. If there was one thing she could expect from Naruto, it was that he would want to find some way to train. Well, I suppose it couldn't hurt. Tell you what, as soon as we cross the border, we will try a new chakra control exercise, one that you will be vital to your success later on as shinobi. She smiled when she saw his face light up at the suggestion. True, it wasn't a jutsu, but there were worse things she could have them do. With that, the team continued to travel on without incident. 2 days later found Team 8 traveling towards the coast of the Gufu Peninsula heading north. They decided to stop near a small stream for the day. Alright, everyone, what I am going to teach you is a chakra control exercise that is similar to the tree walking exercise, but more difficult. For this, I am going to have to ask you to go and switch into your swimsuits, since I do not want you all to get your clothes wet. If it is not too much trouble, Sensei, may I sit this out? I actually learned this at home soon after I learned to tree walk. How, do you ask? My family includes the exercise in our training in order to better care for our hives. Our insects may be robust, but drenching our colonies would be detrimental to our health. Kurenai simply nodded her head in acceptance. She had a feeling that there would be some sort of legitimate excuse for not wanting to get wet. After disappearing behind some trees to change, the other three genin and their sensei came out of hiding. Kiba was sporting a black pair of swimming trunks with the leaf emblem in white stitched into patterns. Hinata came out in a one-piece bathing suit that was mostly lavender with a black and blue diagonal stripe across the stomach. Kurenai was wearing a black one-piece that had a stripe of red and white traveling in the opposite direction of Hinata's stripes on her swimsuit. Naruto, however, was nowhere to be found. They waited for a few minutes before Hinata called out to him. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Is there a problem? Nah, I'm fine. I just needed to find my trunks in all of my crap. Naruto walked out from behind the tree in a pair of blue trunks with orange stripes along the sides and the Konoha swirl on the front of the left leg. He took one look at Hinata and Kurenai in their bathing suits though and was very tempted to hide back behind the tree. The swimming suits they were wearing were modest, but that didn't stop them from showing off their figures. In the back of his mind, as Naruto was trying to convince himself that he wasn't a pervert, Naruto noted that Hinata was a little more developed than most of the other girls around his age. Inner perversions aside, what caused a few raised eyebrows was the black muscle shirt that he had been wearing underneath his clothes earlier was still on. It was odd, since everyone else save for Shino had already changed and they knew that not getting their clothes wet was supposed to be one of the reasons that they went into their swimming gear to start with. Kurenai decided to get straight to the point and simply asked Naruto about his reasoning. You know, Naruto, it would probably be for the best to take your shirt off as well. I doubt any of us will think poorly of you, and we are trying to avoid getting our clothes wet. Naruto looked ready to protest, but sighed instead and looked towards the ground, not meeting the gaze of anyone. This got him a few curious stares from the team, until he began to take the shirt off. He had turned around and began to take the shirt off. Once it was off, he flung it back towards his pack, but not before everyone else could gasp at what they saw. Scratched into his back horizontally were the faded kana that made up the word, murderer, as well as an unusual scarring pattern on his left shoulder, which almost looked like he had a horrible infection on that part of his body at one point. Several more intakes of air were inhaled as Naruto turned around. When he did, two faint kanji, one for vile, and one for demon, appeared on his pectoral area. Naruto turned around to look at his team, almost ashamed of what he had to show them. Hinata looked to almost be in tears, Kiba was pale and looking almost ready to throw up, and Kurenai was attempting to show indifference, but finding it increasingly hard to do so. Shino, for his part, seemed to have a stray tear, but otherwise remained silent. Naruto, I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's okay, sensei. Not many do, Naruto commented, before attempting to draw some sort of humor out to make things less depressing. Besides, these are old and it's not like this was a regular thing for me. Unfortunately, that came out worse than Naruto thought and just made everyone else look worse. Sorry, crappy joke, Naruto, dude, please tell me that those aren't a regular thing for you. Kiba said in a voice that clearly showed how uncomfortable he was with the whole thing. What? No. Most of the time, I was ignored on my birthday. It's not like I had a mob of people chasing me down and trying to kill me on my birthday. Now, let's see, I got this one, he said as he pointed to his back, when I was 4, when one of the matrons at the orphanage decided to get a little tipsy and grabbed hold of a kitchen knife. This one, he continued as he pointed to his shoulder, I got from some idiot Anbu when I was 5. Hurt like hell, too. And these one, he finished as he pointed to his pectorals. I got when I was 6. Apparently, going to the memorial stone on one of Konoha's biggest days of mourning is an absolute no-no for the demon fox of Konoha. But, Naruto-kun, Hinata asked, doesn't your healing factor prevent you from scarring? Naruto seemed to look off to the side as he answered. Just because I heal fast, doesn't mean that I don't get scars. I just avoided injury most of the time. There is a difference between accelerated and complete healing, after all. Before anyone else could, Shino walked up to Naruto and bowed. This confused everyone, including Naruto, until he began to speak. I sincerely apologize, Naruto-san. I believe the Anbu that gave you that scar on your shoulder was a former member of my clan. My father told me about how that member used nano-sized insects and that he was found responsible for the attack. That member was later banished for attacking you. Had I known that you were the victim, I would have tried harder to be a friend of yours at the academy. For that, I apologize. Naruto simply shrugged it off. It's not like you attacked me, Shino. I don't blame you for the attack. I am not one to just go blaming everyone for what they did to me. It doesn't change anything, and as long as something good comes out of it, I am fine. What good would it do me to just get angry about it, other than to become some brooding prick like Sasuke? Besides, I can always lie and say that it's a cool battle scar. So, don't worry so much, okay? Kurenai smiled. Naruto seemed to be able to forgive a lot, and it spoke volumes of his character. Just seeing how well he was able to work through things made her feel more relieved. True, he could have just been lying to save face, but Kurenai could tell that he looked genuine when he said what he said. She knew that there was probably more to it than what he said, but she was proud that he was being at least somewhat mature about things. Soon, everyone was moving on and waiting for Kurenai to begin her lesson. The rest of the day was spent learning and otherwise enjoying each other's company. The date was October 8th, and Team 8 was camped out for the night in a small wooded clearing just off of the beaten path to their destination. At the rate they were traveling, they were set to arrive at Jizengai at some point tomorrow morning, much to the relief of all parties. So far, things had been going well for the team. They had yet to come across any enemy shinobi or bandits. Much to Kurenai's relief, their supplies had been well prepared, and bearing a little rain, the weather had not been terrible. Not to mention, all 4 genin had begun the water walking exercise, although Shino and Hinata seemed to be the only ones so far that had the exercise down enough to be able to do so like it was second nature. Kiba and Naruto seemed to struggle, but then again, they also took the longest to master tree walking as well. It was towards the middle of the night, and Kiba and Naruto were sharing a shift at the night watch. It was decided after their meal last night that Shino and Hinata would take the first shift, and then it would be Kiba and Naruto, and finally Kurenai would stand guard until dawn's early light. For the most part, the 2 genin simply sat in silence around the campfire trying to keep warm. Naruto had sent his clones out to patrol the area, which meant that Kiba and Naruto did not have to focus as much on observing the environment, which also meant that Akamaru could get some sleep in from traveling all day. After a while, Kiba grew bored of simply sitting and watching the fire dance in the makeshift pit, so he turned his attention to his teammate. He immediately noticed that the blonde had a look that clearly showed that he was in deep thought over something, but as to what was anyone's guess. Kiba had noticed that, over the time that Naruto had become a member of Team 8, the hyperactive knucklehead had changed somewhat and that he thought about a lot of things that he might have otherwise ignored when they were all in the academy. Deciding what the topic of the night would be, Kiba struck up a conversation. So, what's on your mind, Naruto? Naruto shook his head, as if clearing his mind of cobwebs. It's nothing. Come on, man, I know that look. There's something on your mind. Naruto turned towards his canine-obsessed friend. Promise not to laugh. Kiba gave a feral smirk. Sure. What the hell? Naruto heaved out a sigh and began to speak. Well, as crazy as it sounds, I keep getting this weird feeling. You know how I have told you guys that I don't know what happened to my mom? At Kiba's nod, Naruto continued. Well, for some reason, I keep getting this feeling that there might be something in this town we are going to that might be able to tell me where she might be. It's like, there is a voice telling me that the answers I seek are there. I have tried to convince myself that it's just me wishing that were the case, but that voice keeps nagging me and telling me she is closer than I think. So, you are saying that, in addition to a humongous fox demon that can destroy us all in your gut, you have a voice in your head saying that we are going to find out something about your family. It was meant to be a joke, but it came across a little more incredulously than Kiba intended, if Naruto's scowl was any indication. Look, I was just messing with you, man. Seriously though, I don't think that is all that crazy. You don't? Why's that? Kiba shrugged his shoulders. Well, because it sounds to me like you are going with your gut instinct. In my family, it's accepted that sometimes your gut knows more about what's going on than you head. Just because you can't justify it, doesn't mean you can dismiss it. Who knows, there may be something there about her. With that, Kiba simply placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Don't worry, man. We'll figure things out. With that, Naruto thanked Kiba and the two genin returned to their watch for the night. The team reached Jizengai the next morning shortly after breaking camp and traveling on foot. Jizengai was not a particularly unique town. The village was set up similar to most coastal towns in the area, with a harbor and marina in the small closed-in bay. Several small ships were floating in and out, carrying various types of cargo ranging from fish and shellfish to exotic imports. Two cliffs came up and towered over the bay, but only for about 20 feet or so. A lighthouse was seen on one of the cliffs in order to ward off ships in the fog from the cliff sides. The other had a small cottage, which was faced so that it overlooked the ocean. There were shops set up for everything from clothing and food to weapons and a few small restaurants. There was also a bank, a post office, a small non-shinobi library, and a few houses here and there for the residents. Some low walls were erected to keep most enemies outside, but any experienced ninja could have easily scaled those walls with little effort. Right now, there were only a few people roaming about here and there and beginning to start their day. The team met with the guards outside of the town and was escorted inside to meet with the town mayor, to whom they were to give the documents from the Hokage to. When Kurenai, Shino, Hinata, Kiba, and Naruto arrived at the town hall, the secretary told the team to wait outside of the mayor's office while she let him know that they were there. After about 10 minutes, the secretary allowed the Konoha ninja to enter the office. When they entered, they were greeted to an otherwise ordinary-looking office, typical of a small-scale politician. Sitting behind the desk in the room was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair with a small goatee and mustache combo. His clothing consisted of casual wear and zori, suggesting that the mayor was probably not used to more formalized meetings. As was tradition, he began with a formal bow and introduced himself. Hello, my name is Daisuke, and I am the mayor of Jizengai. I assume you are here representing Konoha, if your headbands are anything to go by. Yes, we are. My name is Kurenai Yuhi, Jonin Kunoichi of Konohagakure no Sato. I am here with my genin team to deliver potential documents for you to look over in terms of an alliance with Konoha. Kurenai finished, bowed to Daisuke, and then turned towards her team, indicating that she wanted each of them to introduce themselves. I am Shino Aburame. It is an honor to meet your acquaintance, Daisuke-san, Shino said with a formal bow, nothing more, and nothing less. Name's Kiba Inuzuka, and this is my partner Akamaru. Said Canine yapped in recognition. I'm Hinata Hyuga. It's a pleasure to meet you, Daisuke-san. Another formal bow was presented to the leader. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage of Konoha, Datbeo. Unlike with the other names, which the mayor simply acknowledged with a smile and a nod, Daisuke paused at the mention of the Naruto's name. He gave an shocked look to the blonde genin, which made Naruto and company a little unnerved. What did you say your name was? Naruto looked to his team, and then to his sensei, who simply shrugged her shoulders and implied that Naruto should just play along. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, sir. Do you know anything about your parents, Naruto-san? Daisuke asked the blonde demon container. Not really. All I know is that my dad died in the Kyuubi attack. I don't even know anything about my mother, Naruto answered, which was the truth. Hiruzen only ever told Naruto that his dad died trying to fight the fox. The Hokage never mentioned what happened to his mom, though whether that was for keeping her identity a secret or simply not knowing her identity was debatable. How old are you? I will be 13 tomorrow, Daisuke-san. What is with the questions, if I may be so bold, Daisuke-san? Kurenai asked with her arms crossed. She was a little anxious right now with him playing 20 questions with Naruto. This seemed to be a little more involved than simple curiosity. Call it overprotectiveness, but when it came to her students, Kurenai was not one to fool around with simple gimmicks. Daisuke saw his error and corrected himself. My sincerest apologies, Kurenai-san. I did not mean to sound so suspicious. It is just that we have a woman in her late 30s that lives here with the same surname as your student. At this, everyone else in the room fell silent. The rest of Naruto's team was simply looking back and forth between Naruto and Daisuke in an attempt to see if this was some sort of trick. Meanwhile, Naruto was stunned beyond belief. There was someone else living here with the last name Uzumaki. This was just what he was looking for. He wouldn't get his hopes up that this could be his mother, but it could still be someone that was related to him. Who knows, if he was lucky, they might just have a clue as to where his mother might be. However, just as soon as that thought crossed his mind, another crossed it which made him go from ecstatic to apprehensive. Daisuke caught this and asked if something was the matter. Before Naruto could answer, Kurenai asked if perhaps her team and she could talk to Naruto alone for a moment before they could continue, to which Daisuke excused himself and exited the room. So, Naruto, is something wrong? Kurenai asked. Naruto's apprehensive look didn't escape his sensei's notice, and she wanted to make sure that nothing was wrong with her student. After mulling it over in his mind for a few seconds, Naruto answered. Well, I just thought about something, I guess. I mean, I am ecstatic that this person could be my relative, or even if I am lucky my mom. I would want nothing more than to find out if this is a relative of mine. His team nodded at that. They all knew that Naruto wanted to find out about his family, and the idea that his mom could still be alive was an exciting prospect for him. Well, I just thought about what might happen if we meet, and this person does turn out to be my mom. What do you mean, Naruto? Kiba asked the question everyone was asking. Well, I just wondered what might happen if we do meet. I mean, I know nothing about this woman, or about what she thinks of me. I can probably assume she knows about the fox, since she was there when the fourth took me for the ceiling. I guess my fear is in wondering if she ran away thinking I was a monster. What if she thought I was responsible for my dad's death? What if she hates me like all the other villagers? What if she doesn't even want to see me? Naruto asked. Of course, no one knew how to answer that. The fact was, Naruto had some valid concerns. No one knew anything about this woman or for her reasons abandoning Naruto. Heck, they didn't even know who this person was, other than an Uzumaki. Kurenai simply walked over to Naruto and knelt down so that she was eye level with him. I understand your concerns, Naruto. That said, we will all be there for support. I am sure all of us are curious about all of this. Don't worry, We will find out together. Naruto looked towards his team, who simply gave him a reassuring look. He whispered a, "Thank you," before Daisuke returned. Kurenai then turned to Daisuke. "Daisuke-san, I know our mission was to deliver those documents, but is there any way we might be able to meet this woman and perhaps learn more about her?" "Of course you can. I was going to ask if you would all like to come meet her. Business is slow today, so we could all walk over to her cottage and have a talk. I can explain her situation on the way." With that, he led Team 8 to the mystery woman's house. As they made their way to the cottage, which was apparently the cottage that overlooked the sea on the opposite cliff of the lighthouse, Daisuke began to tell Team 8 about the woman. She arrived here by an escort a little over a decade ago with only a few personal belongings to call her own. When we asked her where she came from, she told us that she was coming from Konoha, which was attacked by the Kyubi no Yoko. She told us her son and husband was killed in the attack and that she simply was trying to get away from the pain and destruction caused by the demon. Apparently, the man who escorted her was the one that showed her the corpses of her late husband and son. She couldn't accept that her husband and son were dead, so she was taken by escort here, where we were rebuilding at the time since our village was mostly destroyed during the last Great War. She has been here since that day. Now, all she is doing is following the same routine. She gets up in the morning, performs some warm-ups, eats breakfast, trains some more, has lunch, walks around town, and spends the afternoon either gazing out at the ocean or going through a photo album she has before having dinner and going to sleep. She pretty much has followed that routine for over a decade. I have tried to convince her to do something else, but she simply seems to be going through the motions, almost as if her life no longer has any meaning for her. That's a real pity, too. She is a rather beautiful woman, even after all these years, at least in my opinion. Still, maybe you five might just be what the doctor ordered. They came to a stop in front of the cottage. It wasn't particularly grand, just a standard 3-bedroom house with a front door. There was a back porch for looking out at the sunset, or you could do so from the master bedroom. Overall, there was nothing extraordinary about the house. Perhaps it would be best if you wait out here while I announce you. I am one of the few people she talks with on a regular basis. Receiving 5 nods from his guests, Daisuke walked into the cottage to find the woman. The owner of the cottage was currently lying in an Adirondack chair on her back porch under an umbrella with a table and a cup of tea at her side. She appeared to be in her late 30s wearing a blue t-shirt and gray sweatpants. Some women would have been concerned with how they were dressed, but she didn't care right now. Her long crimson hair simply hung off of her shoulders like a curtain. Her violet eyes were presently gazing at a photo album of her personal memories. Currently, the album was flipped to a photo that she considered to be her most precious treasure. It was a picture of her holding her newborn baby son in the hospital, and now the only thing that remained of her child. She could never forget the day that he was taken from her, only to be sent to his death. Frankly, when she saw his corpse, a part of her died that day. The self she had that enjoyed things like pulling pranks and chattering with her friends was killed that day. Her favorite phrase, "to never give up," meant little when she was forced to identify the remains of her family. She was brought out of her reverie by a knock on her door. She knew automatically that Daisuke was coming by for another visit. He would always come by and try to convince her to do something, anything, to get out of her cottage. Frankly, the only thing she wanted to do now was to spend the rest of her forsaken existence in peace, but she would not turn away company, if for no other reason than to prevent herself from going insane from being left to her thoughts for too long. She placed her album on the table next to her and got up to answer the door. Good, she began before turning to the sundial on her porch to check the time, which read 12:37 p.m., afternoon, Daisuke-san. What can I do for you today? Actually, I came to inform you that you have some guests, Kushina-san. Apparently, they are from Konoha and. You know how I feel about that place, Daisuke-san. That place simply brings up too many memories for me, some very painful memories. She then turned her attention to the photo album before sitting back down and looking at the photo while she attempted to blink back a tear that threatened to fall on the page. You know, he would have been 13 tomorrow. I'm aware of your disdain of Konoha, Kushina-san, but one of them is claiming to be an Uzumaki. I figured you might want to see them and see for yourself if you know them. Kushina, as the woman was now called, was stunned. She knew for a fact that the rest of her family died when Uzu no Kuni was wiped out during one of the last upheavals of the nation. She was the last Uzumaki. No one else had that name. She made sure when she traveled throughout all the nations to find the rest of her family before going to Konoha. So, why would someone torture her by giving someone that name? She simply had to find out. Alright, I will see them. Who knows, maybe they can tell me who decided to play this sick joke on an emotionally distressed woman, Kushina answered. Daisuke, with a pained look on his face at the tone and language Kushina used, then turned around back through the house and went to let in Team 8. Alright, she is willing to see you all, but be careful. Konoha brings a lot of painful memories for her, so you might want to be careful. If you need me, I will be in the living room. After giving his short speech, Daisuke went to sit on the couch in the living room while Kurenai, Naruto, Kiba, Hinata, and finally Shino walked out to the back porch. When they walked out, Naruto was up front, with Kurenai behind him, and Shino, Hinata, and Kiba with Akamaru on his head standing behind her. They felt that, with this being a meeting between Naruto and a potential relative, they would give him a little space while showing support at the same time. Giving Naruto a pat on the back, Kurenai stood back to watch as Naruto interacted with this woman. Taking a deep gulp of air to attempt to steady his nerves, Naruto began. Excuse me, Uzumaki-san. Naruto wasn't sure how to start. Simply asking about who she was wouldn't help if she hated him. It was times like these that Naruto cursed himself for not being more socially adept. Hopefully, this woman, whoever she was, would not hold it against him if he had a hard time talking to her. He could safely say that he would rather be facing down one of Kurenai-sensei's genjutsu right now than facing this woman. Kushina turned around to her speaker, hoping to begin by stating that she was not in a mood to play games. However, whatever comment she had died in her throat when she turned around to come face to face with Naruto. She completely ignored the other 4 people on her porch. Her complete focus was on the young man in front of her. He was wearing a pair of black ninja sandals, brown shinobi pants, a burnt orange t-shirt with a blue coat. He stood at about 4 feet 8 inches and appeared to be about 12 or 13 years of age. A wild mess of blonde hair adorned his young head, but it was his face that drew her attention. Piercing blue eyes that seemed to look into your soul and 3 whisker-like birthmarks that adorned his cheeks made him an exact replica of her deceased son. No, it can't be. I saw his body. Oh, please Kami, let this not be a trick. Kushina thought. She brought her hands into a ram seal and yelled out, Kai. In an attempt to break through any genjutsu. When she established the fact that what she was seeing was real, she was stunned. Miss, Naruto was confused. He had no idea why this woman was acting like this. He was expecting a look of hatred, yelling, hell even a uttering of, demon, or, monster, but checking for genjutsu. Did she think he wasn't real for some reason? But before he could ask, she decided to speak again, and what came out of her mouth was not what he expected, but only hoped for. Sochi. Kushina couldn't believe it. Her son, the one she thought died the night of the fox's attack, was alive, and standing right in front of her. She didn't know how, or why, but here he was. In that moment, She didn't care that she had been lied to. She didn't care that she was forced away from her son. All she cared about in that moment was that she was standing face to face with her son. She couldn't fight her emotions much longer. This was all simply overwhelming for the former kunoichi. She began to cry as she walked towards her son with a photo album in her hand. If Naruto wasn't nervous before, he was now. He could barely handle women normally, but now there was this woman who just called him son, and was now crying and walking over to him with an album. He was beyond nervous, he was worried. Was she crying because she hated him like everyone else did? Was she crying because she was mad? Before his fears could get to him, though, she stopped in front of him and took out one photo to show him. He took one look at the photo in question, and what he saw forced him to begin tearing up. The photo was of the same woman that was in front of him. She had a grin that went from ear to ear in a manner that was not unlike his own foxy grin, and she was holding a blonde baby. What made the baby unique, though, was that it had whisker marks on its cheeks, exactly like his. Realization hit him like a punch from Tsunade of the Sannin. This woman was his mother. He looked up to the woman in question with a pleading look in his eyes. "KKK Ka-san." She nodded, and immediately Naruto leapt into his mother's arms, letting almost 13 years of frustration, depression, and loneliness finally come flowing forth as a river to a parched land. Kushina herself could no longer hold back her emotions either, while the now overflowing salt water accumulates on her cheeks. She simply kept embracing her son while repeating the same phrase over and over again. "My Sochi, my beautiful baby boy." Finally, her heart was at ease. She had a part of her life back. She had her family again. As mother and son reunited, Team 8 stood to the side and let them have their moment. Kurenai was attempting to keep her own emotions in check, but wasn't doing a great job. The moment seemed to come straight out of some of the best family novels she had ever read. Anyone that was looking at the sight before her and didn't feel something has a serious psychological disorder, she decided. Deep down, she knew that someone upstairs was looking out for her charge. There was a reason that they were assigned this mission, and now she had a feeling she knew what that was. Shino was also brought to tears, but at least he was hiding it better than anyone else at the moment. Kiba, on the other hand, was a mess. Kiba had tear stains that began to look like someone had added a gloss to his tattoos. When Kiba saw the raised eyebrow of his teammate, which was more out of curiosity than out of anything else. "Stupid salt water. Got something in my eye," was the only explanation that Shino received from the Inuzuka as he vigorously attempted to clear his vision. Truth be told, this was one of the few times that Kiba honestly didn't care that he looked like a girl bawling his eyes out the way he was. This had been something that Naruto had been looking forward to for a very long time, and the moment was simply too happy to acting macho like he usually did. He would be proud to admit today that he cried. Hinata, on the other hand, was glad for Naruto. She was joyful that Naruto got just what he wanted for his birthday. It had not been much of a secret that Naruto didn't want much other than to know that he was appreciated and to find out about his family. So, to finally know that his mom was alive made Hinata feel as warm as a cabin with a fire in the fireplace. Happy birthday, Naruto-kun. I suppose this means that you got what you wished for. Who knows, maybe someday I will too. Kurenai and Daisuke led Team 8 and the newly reunited Uzumaki family back into the cottage. Everyone present had felt their heartstrings plucked when they saw the reunion of mother and son. As soon as everyone was relatively calm, Kushina offered water for everyone to drink if they were thirsty. Kurenai and Daisuke declined, saying that they wanted to try and look over the documents that the Sandaime Hokage sent. Kiba, Shino, and Hinata offered to go with her so that Naruto could get some alone time with his mom. At first, Naruto wanted to ask for them to stay, since he was a bit nervous about spending any time alone with her, but Kushina reassured him by requesting that the rest of his team be allowed to stay in her cottage until they were ready to leave. Kurenai agreed and followed Daisuke back to his office. Not really knowing what to do, Kiba, Shino, and Hinata told Naruto that they would explore the town and be back by that evening. Naruto was a tad more nervous once he was left alone with his mother. Naruto didn't quite know where to begin when it came to this situation. He had dreamt of this moment for ages, and now that it was here, he didn't quite know where to start. He had so many questions, and yet he was apprehensive of their answers. There was just so much he wanted to know. What was she like? Did he have anything in common with her? Was she here in this seaside town this whole time? Did she know about the rest of his family? Perhaps most importantly of all, did she love him, and if so, why did she abandon him? Kushina sat down and saw the look in her son's eyes. She could see the confusion that was building in his blue eyes. She couldn't really blame him for that. She had just as many questions running rampant in her heart and mind as well. What was he like? Did he develop any characteristics of hers or her husband's? Had anyone bothered to take care of him while she was in her exile? Not to mention the most terrifying question on her mind. Did he hate her for what she had done? After a rather uncomfortable silence, it was Naruto that decided to speak up first. So, where do you want to start, Ka-san? Kushina looked up at her son. Frankly, with so many questions that she wanted to ask, she tried to narrow it down. Why don't we start at the beginning? How about if you tell me what your life has been like, and I will tell you mine. Although, I must admit that mine probably won't be nearly as exciting as yours, considering who has been taking care of you and all. Naruto gave her a confused look. I don't mean to be rude or anything, Ka-san, but what are you talking about? I was forced to raise myself. Up until recently, I didn't really have anybody. Was there supposed to be someone looking after me? Kushina was shocked. He had to grow up alone. What about his godfather, or one of his father's students? Wasn't one of them supposed to be looking out for him? Kushina decided to get to the bottom of things. Naruto, are you aware of who your father was? Or that you had a godfather? Or that your father had a genin team? Naruto shook his head. No, the old man never told me any of that. He only said that he died during the Kyuubi attack and that I would be able to find out more about him when I turned 16 or become a chunin. He never said that my dad had a genin team or that I had a godfather. Inside, Kushina was fuming. Her son was forced to grow up alone, and the people that were supposed to be taking care of him were not doing so. She and Minato even told Jiraiya and Kakashi that if something were to happen to her and Minato, that one of them was supposed to look out for Naruto. Kakashi, she might marginally understand if he went into a depression similar to hers, something that he had gone into when his teammate Obito Uchiha died, but Jiraiya. Oh, no, he was not slipping his way out of this one. When I get my hands on that super perverted, toad whispering, lazy good-for-nothing sack of crap, oh there will be hell to pay, Kushina thought, with a murderous intent. Meanwhile, somewhere in Hai no Kuni, at a random hot spring, was a man that appeared to be in his 50s was spying on some women bathing in a local hot spring. His Hittite was a customized one with the kanji for oil written on it, which was a symbol for the toads of Myobokuzan. Twin red lines of war paint were etched into his skin running from his eyes down his cheeks. A mane of wild white hair adorned his head and was tied into a ponytail. His attire was most unusual for a shinobi and consisted of a mesh undershirt, a green vest, green pants, wooden getas, and a red vest with a yellow oval on each side of the chest. A huge scroll was strapped to his back. He was none other than Jiraiya the Toad Sage, aka the Village Madness, aka the Perverted Hermit, aka the author of the infamous Ika Ika series. As if on a comical cue by fate, a chill ran up the man's spine. He looked around to see if there had been anyone that had spotted him, but found no one. The chill felt as if someone had urinated on his grave, and then dressed in drag and did a dance on it while playing some obnoxious child's tune. Man, the last time I felt something like that, Dan and Tsunade nearly kicked the living crap out of me for doing research on them, Jiraiya thought. Man, why do these kinds of feelings always happen to me? Naruto was starting to get a little nervous. His mother seemed to have a murderous look on her face. In the hopes of sparing whomever she was thinking of killing, Naruto decided to speak up. Mom, about these guys you were talking about. Kushina blinked, completely forgetting that she was in the middle of a conversation. Sorry about that, Sochi. I was just thinking about what I am going to have to do with a few people that were supposed to be taking care of you if something were to happen to me or your father. So, is there any way you might be able to tell me more about my dad? Perhaps, but I won't tell you just yet until we get back to Konoha. I would rather not blab about something that is more than likely an S-class secret and risk losing my head if you catch my drift. Wait, so you will be coming back with us? Naruto asked excitingly. It was one thing to know that his mother was alive, but to hear that she wanted to return made him super excited. Kushina gave a smirk. Well, I have been away from the village for too long, and there are some people that I need answers from. Besides, what kind of mother finds her son after 13 years and doesn't try to get to know him better? Naruto smiled briefly at that, enjoying the fact that he felt wanted before settling into a depressing frown. So, why did you leave me, Ka-san? Did something happen? Naruto asked. He knew that he was being blunt, but he really didn't know of a way to ask the question in any other fashion. Frankly, he was perhaps the most curious, and the most apprehensive about this particular question. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer, but he knew that if he was ever going to know why he had to grow up alone and hated, he needed an answer. What shocked Naruto was that Kushina began to cry after he asked that question. She turned away and refused to look him in the face. She then whispered her answer to him, revealing a truth Naruto was not expecting. Because I thought you were dead. Naruto was stunned. Excuse me. Perhaps it might be easier to explain things if I told you the whole story. With that, Kushina began her tale of sorrow that was the source of the reality of her situation. After the story, by the time Kushina finished, she was having a difficult time keeping her composure. She would have shed more tears if her eyes were not for the fact that her eyes were beginning to dry out. She then turned to Naruto, the son she thought was dead, with a pleading look. After I saw your body, I just couldn't take it. I couldn't stay there. The man that gave me your body offered me some assistance to pack my things so that I could be moved out of the hospital, and even found some Anbu willing to help me get away from the village. I didn't think that there was anything left for me in Konoha. Kushina then turned towards her son. Naruto, I beg of you, please forgive me. I didn't mean to leave you alone like that for so long. I felt so numb after realizing that I would not be able to care for you. I know I should have checked to see if that baby was even you, but I was so distraught that I didn't think. I know that I don't deserve forgiveness for abandoning you, but... Kushina was interrupted when Naruto came around the table they were sitting at and embraced his mother. You thought I was dead. You were given a dead body. I thought you might have been dead or simply abandoned me. The important thing now is that you and I are together again and that you love me, right? He asked with trepidation. Kushina nodded before returning the embrace. Of course, and I will always love you, no matter what happens. The mother and son simply sat there and embraced each other, simply comforted in knowing that this was only the beginning. Back in Konoha, Hiruzen was looking through a photo album that held a collection of memories he has had as Hokage. He stopped on one particular photo as he was taking his trip down memory lane. It was a photo of his predecessor Minato Namikaze and his 8-month pregnant lover Kushina Uzumaki. They were standing next to Hiruzen with Jiraiya in the background grinning like he just won the lottery. Despite the rather upbeat nature of the photo, it brought nothing but sadness to the aging shinobi. It was a painful reminder of the real reason that Hiruzen never told Naruto about his mother. Flashback. 13 years. Location. Konoha Morgue. Hiruzen was in a forlorn mood. His predecessor, Minato Namikaze, had sacrificed himself to defeat the Kyuubi no Yoko, and now his infant son's mother was missing. She had disappeared 3 hours ago and had not been seen since. Hiruzen was considering calling in a squad of shinobi to try and find her when a man that Hiruzen noticed looked to be from the R&D department came and told him to follow him down to the morgue. He met up with the same individual, who began by giving the aging Kage the horrible news. Hokage-sama, I have some terrible news. The body of Kushina Uzumaki has been found. You found her body. But how is that possible? The doctors said she was healthy as an ox. Hiruzen could not quite comprehend just how this had happened. There were no complications with her birth, and Kushina seemed fine when Minato left. Apparently, sir, Kushina-san received a fatal cerebral hemorrhage from a blow to the head she sustained when the hospital was hit during the attack. We have labeled her death as a casualty of the Kyuubi's attack. I am sorry, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen sat down in a chair with his head in his palms. This was turning out to be the worst time in his life. He was being forced to retake the title of Hokage only a few short years after stepping down, and now he had to deal with an orphan Jinchuriki that some of the villagers and some of the shinobi were asking for the death of. End flashback. Hiruzen took a drag of his pipe as he attempted to alleviate the burden on his heavy heart. He didn't have the heart to tell Naruto that both of his parents were dead. After all, how easy is it to tell a child that they truly are alone in the world? Hopefully, when Naruto was old enough to know the truth, he would be able to understand that Hiruzen simply didn't want to see him hurt. Several hours had passed since Kushina and Naruto had their heart-to-heart talk. Kurenai and the rest of Team 8 had offered to help Kushina pack after hearing that she wanted to return to Konoha with everyone. Once that was decided, Kushina offered to cook everyone dinner for that night. The spread was relatively simple, since Kushina lived by herself and therefore didn't have much to begin with. The meal was a simple pot of salt ramen and some grilled fish, but everyone appreciated the meal. Naruto was almost brought to tears, as this was the first time that anyone had ever cooked a meal for him other than the Ichirakus. There was much laughter and swapping of stories for everyone. Kushina told some stories about a team of genin she led while she was in Konoha. Everyone was surprised that her team consisted of Yugao Azuki, a predominant member of the Konoha Anbu, Hayate Gecko, a master of Kenjutsu in Konoha, and in an unexpected twist, Iruka Yumino. Naruto was going to have to remember that little tidbit for later when he would see Iruka-sensei next. She also told her audience that she had actually helped Konoha out a lot before she became pregnant with Naruto and had played a significant role in the war effort during the Third Great Shinobi World War. She was nicknamed the Crimson Reaper for appearing on the battlefield in her uniform and crimson hair and being able to kill an entire platoon of enemy combatants by herself. Her skill with a bow staff was apparently high as well, earning the acknowledgement of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist as a worthy opponent. In fact, for her duty to Konoha, the village started wearing a red spiral, a former symbol of Uzu no Kuni, on all of their uniforms. That little tidbit astounded the genin. There had always been rumors as to why the red insignia was on their uniforms, but no one had ever been able to find out why. To hear that it was because of the woman in front of them was impressive to say the least. Kushina, meanwhile, was listening to several stories that Team 8 had to tell of training and missions so far. She couldn't help but laugh at some of antics that her son had gotten into. He seemed to have a strong rivalry with the Inuzuka, almost like that between two siblings. Shino seemed to be the voice of reason, and unless she missed her guess, the Hyuga girl had a crush on her Sochi. She would have to explore that a little more. Kiba unfortunately made the mistake of mentioning how Team 8 had come to be a 5-man squad. He told the whole story beginning to end, starting with the test and ending with the hospital visit. Needless to say, Kushina was seeing red. The idea of someone nearly killing her son made her blood boil. She was about to go and carve her name in history as killer of the legendary copycat ninja and the pink witch that decided to turn her son into a training dummy, but Naruto managed to convince her otherwise. As much as she was loath to admit it, she couldn't bring herself to actually harm someone that Naruto had already forgiven. That did not mean though that she didn't want to meet them. Oh, she relished in the idea of striking fear into their hearts. If anyone was the wiser, one might have suspected that Kushina might have had a little Mitarashi blood in her. Soon, everyone had grown tired and went to retire for the evening. Kurenai and Hinata retired to one of the bedrooms while Kiba and Shino offered to sleep in the living room. That left the last bed to Naruto. He tried to say that they could share, but neither of his teammates wanted to hear about it. They made their decision and they didn't want to share a bed. After that was settled, everyone slipped into their nightwear and fell asleep. It was the middle of the night when Naruto had fallen into a nightmare. He did not have them often, and rarely around his team, but they were just as painful as ever. Time skip. Kushina was awoken to the sounds of whimpering coming from the other room. She didn't know what the cause was for a second, until she recognized the voice as her son's voice. Throwing the covers off of herself, she crept into where Naruto was sleeping to see him tossing and turning. He was obviously in some sort of a nightmare, but she didn't know how bad it was or what it was about. She got an idea though, when Naruto started begging in his sleep. Ka-san, I'm sorry, please come back, please don't hate me. Please don't leave me. Kushina was heartbroken. He thought that he was going to leave him. He must have had a fear of abandonment, or at least of being alone. It broke her heart to hear her son continue to beg for her not to leave. She couldn't stand it any longer. She walked over to his bed and shook him until he awoke. Almost immediately after he woke up, Naruto looked around, saw his mother, and dove into her arms, apologizing over and over again. I'm sorry that dad is gone. I'm sorry you don't have a family anymore. I'm sorry. Naruto continued until Kushina started rubbing his back in a soothing motion and shushing him. Hush. Now Sochi. I don't hate you. You were just having a nightmare. It's going to be okay now. Come, follow me. With that, Kushina led Naruto into her bedroom. Naruto was confused at first, until she got under the covers and invited Naruto to do the same. He got into the bed with her, but didn't know why he was in her bed. Her answer came when she pulled him to her and held him close while humming to try and soothe his nerves. She could see his eyes droop to signal that he was going to fall back asleep soon, so she decided to tell him good night. Now, you will stay here tonight, my little maelstrom. Sleep now. I promise that I will not leave you. You don't have to worry about being abandoned anymore. I will be here for you, for now and for always. I love you, Sochi. I love you too, Ka-san, Naruto whispered in a broken voice. He took a deep breath, admiring the scent of oceans and fresh linens that he could only describe as his mother's scent. For the first time in a long time, Naruto laid his head down to sleep. He didn't mind the arrangement. For once it made him feel at peace, like he was just a normal kid staying with his mother. He had one last thought before he drifted off to greener dream pastures. This has been the best birthday present ever.